There may be a goalie controversy in Calgary, but it's probably for the best of reasons.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me here today alongside my partner in crime, Nick Zararis. Nick, how are you?
I'm good. It's upsetting it's dark at 4 o'clock every day now, but other than that, I'm okay.
Yeah, it's brutal, an absolute killer. But we're going to talk all about Jacob Markstrom's injury, some exciting NHL news, and the Flames just fully committing to the bit of the same old Calgary Flames. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. And while you're hanging out here, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Flames wherever you're getting your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Free little Christmas gift would be a fantastic little 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify. That would be fantastic. Jacob Markstrom yesterday took a putt.
It's weird, man. Stuff happens in practice. These are some of the best athletes in the world, and you're paying half attention. And from what I read, like his hand was turned, so it hit like the inside part of the blocker where there isn't a lot of padding, and hit his wrist or his hand or something like that, and that's what broke. So you're glad it's nothing like insane. Like it's only going to be a few weeks. Just a testament to how insane all these guys are as hockey players, that they come back a few weeks after breaking a bone. Like, I stubbed my toe downstairs and I'm out of commission for like a good 20 minutes, half hour. I can't imagine breaking a hand, breaking a couple fingers, and then, 2-3 weeks, I'll put it in a splint. I'll be good to go. Just like, come on, stop trying to be a hero.
Right. And I mean, the Flames did luck out here with him not needing surgery too.
Yeah.
I think that they have kind of, again, lucked out in the sense of not having a significant amount of injuries these last few seasons. I mean, Jacob Pelletier, of course, Kevin Rooney, who is probably going to spend the season in the AHL. And now, I mean, Markstrom's, I feel like the first real significant one of the season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's nothing you can do. Guys are going to get hurt. It's just that's part of the nature of sports, especially a dangerous sport like hockey. You're glad it's nothing major. I mean, we're talking about broken bones, but that in the scheme of hockey injuries, that's relatively minor.
It's
We're
minuscule,
not talking, yeah, we're not talking about surgery. We're not talking about a long rehab process, but it does put the Flames in an interesting position now, where they get to audition both of their goalies they have in the organization to see what exactly they want to do. And they don't have to make a decision whenever Markstrom's healthy as far as what they're going to do with either guy, but at the very least it's an opportunity to what's Vladar look like with a more consistent workload? What's Dustin Wolf look like now? It's a good way to get a read on what you have. And I'm not going to say it's in a pressure-free environment, because the Flames they're still competitive. They're still in a lot of these games. They're beating decent teams. Like they did beat Dallas last week, which, nothing to sneeze at, but
right.
The expectation here isn't to win the Stanley Cup. If the Flames go, 4-6 over the next 2 weeks because the goaltending's not great, that's not the end of the world. This is as close as you're going to get to a stress-free environment to kind of do a trial run of both Vladar and of Dustin Wolf. So it works out for the Flames from a roster perspective that they have two guys who need more work. And, you're never going to punt on the season, as we've kind of addressed. The Flames still want to be competitive this year. But this is about as good as it's going to get as far as trying things out, experimenting.
Yeah, and I mean, they have the flexibility to do that, like you said. And I mean, I'm glad that this is happening now, kind of, far enough into this thing where they've kind of built a little bit of a foundation, I would say. They have more confidence than they did during and right after that 6-game losing streak. So there's something there there's something to build off of, and it's just like you said, there isn't an immense amount of pressure. This is the perfect time for Dan Vladar to go out there and prove that he can be a solid backup goaltender, whether that's for the Flames or a different organization. And Dustin Wolf, I truly believe that he needs consistent reps in order for him to get settled in. That's not going to happen with these, once every 3 or 4 weeks starts.
No, absolutely. We know that this is kind of a thing that bears out statistically. Generally speaking, your best goalies are going to be the ones who have the biggest workloads. There's not a direct one-to-one correlation there, but generally speaking, that happens to be the case. You become a starter because you're too good to be a backup. You become a workhorse starter if you're a really good starter. So generally speaking, you got to work your way up that incremental ladder from backup to starter to workhorse. And the only way to do that is through playing. So they got to make sure. And I know I just said, that they can see what Vladar looks like with a starter's workload or vice versa. But I imagine they're going to split this pretty evenly between the two of them because it is an audition process for both guys. I know Vladar has a bigger NHL sample size. I want to say he has close to 100 NHL starts, something around there. And Wolf has, 2, but at the very least, you want to see where both guys are at, and then it gives you more information. I know that's not very pleasing or satisfactory to a fan base that's kind of tired of being told to be patient, but this is the good type of patient because this does matter as far as the big picture. Because if Vladar is good enough that they can turn him into a 2 or a 3, that's a decent asset. Or if Wolf is good enough to play, okay, you have your long-term goalie succession plan set up. So there are bigger, more important things at play than just the wins and losses right now. And this is something a little more tangible than just the idea of, well, eventually we're going to trade for better players or sign better players or draft better players. Dustin Wolf's been the AHL goalie of the year 2 years in a row. He's killing it in the A once again. They are about at the point where there's nothing left to do at that level for him. So they need to find out one way or another if he's going to be an NHL guy or not, or if he's just going to be a super AHL guy, which, there's no shame in being an AHL lifer. There are plenty of guys who make a decent living down in that league. It's just a matter of, for the Flames, is Dustin Wolf going to be their starter 2-3 years from now?
Yeah. And it's nice to kind of see this come to fruition because so many of us have been talking about this for years, probably three or 4 seasons now, I would say, and it's happening. So even though it is a baby step, you do have to crawl before you can run rather, and we're getting there. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And, let's take these next few weeks leading up to the holiday, in stride and just go in with a positive attitude and appreciate that we're finally getting to see Dustin Wolf probably on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and he needs it. As you said before, they got to get him in. It's really hard to be a backup goalie. We underestimate that workload. It's the same thing as being a bench player in baseball, where you play very infrequently, and it's just hard to not be at game speed and then thrown into game speed. We always talk about how there's no way to simulate game speed in practice. Like, you can run as aggressive a practice as you want. It's not going to be the same thing as game speed.
No, and why would it be? You'd waste all your energy and whatnot. But coming up next, we are going to talk about some exciting NHL news, including the salary cap and the latest on the NHL Draft next location. But before we do that, we are going to take a quick break and talk about Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in search, according to US Indeed data. Indeed knows when you're growing your business, you have to make every dollar count, and that's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. All you have to do is visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. That is Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us on this episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you're listening to your podcast and, of course, on YouTube as well. It's finally here. We finally have a true estimate of what the cap's going to be.
Yes. So generally speaking, the way it's supposed to work is you take all of the hockey revenue in the entire league, you split that in half, because half has to go to the players and half has to go to the owners. And then you divide it by 32. That is supposed to be how you calculate the salary cap. That's how you're supposed to get the number. That hasn't been the case the last 4 years because the pandemic happened. The players got paid and the owners didn't because there were no fans. Everybody knows for the 2020 season and most of the 2021 season, the only thing the teams were getting was TV money. And they didn't get the full TV money they were supposed to get because the second season was only 56 games. So that's another factor here, that it took 3.5 seasons to pay off. I want to say, if I remember correctly, the number was about 800 million, maybe $1 billion in escrow that the players had to pay off, which is why the salary cap was flat for 2 years and it only went up $1 million this year. The number that's being reported, $87.5 million, is still well short of what the projected revenue would actually be if we were to calculate this number properly. If we were to do this properly, the number would be about $96-97 million based on what they're forecasting, which is nothing to sneeze at. $10 million is an elite player in today's NHL. $10 million is, your Artemi Panarin, your Austin Matthews, your Mitch Martin. You can get an elite player for an additional 10. Now, you can either choose to look at it through that lens, or you could look at it through the lens of pretty much every competitive team is up against the ceiling right now. They are right there at that $83.5 million threshold. And $5 million of breathing room, that's 2 RFAs. That's 1 decent unrestricted free agent. That's a Blake Coleman for some teams, right? Or that's a Capo Caco and K. Andre Miller. Yeah, that's an Mangiapane. That's 1 really good roster player who's an unrestricted free agent, or 2 restricted free agents. And in this environment, that is nothing to sneeze at. Of course, you would like there to be more money in the system so more players, more teams can have more good players. I mean, ultimately, that's the goal. In an ideal world, you'd have 32 good teams filled with 18 good skaters and 2 good goalies each. There's not enough talent to do that. But if there's more money in the system, at the very least, it means there's going to be an opportunity here for good teams to retain good players, or teams that can go out and just go and sign somebody, or it'll increase the flexibility you have to make trades because you'll have more room to work with.
Yeah,
that's the good thing. It's very easy to get pessimistic and defeatist about the landscape of the NHL when it comes to stuff like this, because the league just doesn't do a good enough job when it comes to growing revenues. But this is a small victory for both the players and for the fans, because I know a lot of people, how is this a win for the fans? Every team can afford 1 more good player.
Yeah. And, I think immediately my first thought was, oh, well, $96 million, that's the additional $10 million. You're suddenly feeling a little bit better about the Jonathan Huberdeau contract and not stressing over, the percentage that it takes up. And I mean, whatever, that's something that's done. You can't fix that. But like you said, you can what was it? $5 million. That's
about $5 million. Yeah.
I really think that is something to be excited about, because like you said, it's a good player. You have more flexibility, and that is what so many of these teams have needed. Nick, what is the main reason we have talked about the Flames being unable to make trades?
Because they have no money.
No one has money. What will they have with more cap space? A little bit more wiggle room. And this is just number one, the escrow's paid off. Everyone can take a sigh of relief or whatever, because it's not an issue anymore. And it's a step forward for the league too, because more revenue is always a good thing. That's the game's growing, not at the rate you would hope, but
Speaking of that, there was something we can talk about on the subject of revenue, because I was reading today the Athletic did a thing about attendance across the league, and currently, so far this season, 15 of the 32 teams are averaging a sellout, which that's encouraging.
Wow.
That's actual growth. We are seeing tangible growth. There are a handful of teams that are pretty close to a sellout. There are a few teams. There are only 2 teams that are lower than they were last year, and that's the Capitals, who they're not as good as they were the last couple of years. And I don't want to say a disinterested, but mildly apathetic fan base. The Flames are a little bit lower than last year. I think that's reasonable based on what you've seen from them so far this year and the kind of feeling that everybody had based on the summer. But you see growth in markets, which is encouraging. Florida is up about 10-15%. New
Yeah.
Jersey is up 15%. And all it takes is one good season to turn your fortunes around, which is why a lot of these clubs are very, very content with trying to get to that soggy middle, make the playoffs. You win around like the Panthers. You're telling me we can do 15% growth? Yeah. It's not a linear one-to-one. It's not going to be the same in
No.
every market, but there are signs that the league has more or less fully recovered from where it was pre-pandemic. And I know I was talking about this over the weekend with one of my friends, because they asked me how come the cap in hockey's been so flat. I was explaining the escrow thing, and he's like, yeah, I remember when Panarin signed that contract with the Rangers. He was the second highest paid player in the league. And they signed that contract under the idea that they would be at $96-100 million salary cap probably by now. Like, I remember
Yeah.
writing something that summer, the summer Panarin was a free agent, that the conversation will shift from what the number is to the percent of the cap, which
Yeah.
is that's the next step in this conversation as we get more regular growth. Because in an ideal world, the salary cap should be going up $3, $4, $5 million every single offseason, because
Yeah.
your revenues increase every single year if you're running a good league, in theory. I think we're past the point where we have to worry about like contracting teams, relocating teams. I think
Yes.
Gary would rather die than allow the Coyotes to move or the Jets to move. I think he would throw himself in front of any efforts to move those teams. So I think
Yeah.
we're kind of at a point now where the revenue is going to keep growing consistently. It's simply just a matter of, can we make the growth enough that the owners aren't fighting over pennies.
Right.
The comparison I always give is, there's a pie, and instead of trying to go into the store and buy the bigger size pie to share for more people, the owners are trying to paw at the pie that's already on the table. And there's a couple teams that just get left with scraps where they don't make as much. And this works for everybody more or less, but with a more forward thinking approach of, hey, let's try and get more people invested. Let's try and tap into new revenue streams. Let's do what we can to grow, as opposed to fight over what's already here. That's the big issue with a lot of these big topics in the hockey world.
Yeah. And we have seen an increase with Chicago too. I
Yeah.
mean, as soon
Chicago's up,
as
I want to say 3,000 people per game based on
that's
last year.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's like a whole section. That's
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, boo Chicago, but like again, it shows what getting a good player does for a team and why
Yeah.
the extra 5 million matters.
Absolutely, for sure. And they know they're not going to be good this year, but one good player is enough to start forecasting your hopes onto. So take a hint, Calgary. Get one good player that, even if the team isn't good, hey, we got a young guy who's really good. And in 2 or 3 years, when the team around him is good, it's going to be really fun.
Let's go Flames. Let's maybe tank top 10 pick just for fun as an experiment. But really quick, the draft will be in Vegas
Yes.
at the Sphere.
The last centralized draft, which again, I think is stupid. I know a lot of the GMs are complaining about, well, we don't like having to travel. We don't like having to look over our shoulders while we're at the tables. You're grown adults. If you want to work a trade out with somebody, walk over to their table and pull them away from their table. Like, I
Right.
don't know why they're acting like this is impossible. They've done it for 100 years, and all of a sudden it's, well, nah, we can save money. We can do this. Let's grow up here.
Yeah. Let's pretend that we know how to be grown adults, but that's just again another charade for the NHL. And then worlds, or not worlds, but best of the best
Best
tournament.
on best tournament. From
Yeah.
what we're hearing, it's only going to be 4 nations, which that's not a best on best tournament.
No.
That'll only be over the course of a week. That it'll be America, Canada, Sweden, and if I remember correctly, Finland as the fourth team. Which, sure, I'm not going to complain about international hockey, but being that there's no real stakes because this is an entirely made up tournament. It's not the Olympics. It's not a World Cup of hockey. It's not a best. It has no stakes. It's just to appease the
Right.
players who really want this. I mean, sure, I'll watch, but until you address the whole let's get them to the Olympics thing, yeah.
Just let them go to the Olympics. At the end
It'd
of
be
the day,
nice.
that's all people want. But coming up next, we are going to wrap up the show with our wonderful reoccurring segment of the Flames just refusing to roll over and die. But before we do that, let's take a quick break here, and I'm going to tell you how to get the perfect holiday gift for the sports fan in your life. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets for your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With Game Time, you get last-minute deals, all-in prices, view from your seat, and the best price guaranteed. I really do love that there's no stress when you're buying from Game Time because there's the protection, there's that job loss protection too, which is fantastic because heaven forbid something happens and you are unable to make it to this event. See the view from your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour before it starts. This is the place to find the best last minute seats. Right now, you can download Game Time, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us today on Lockdown Flames. You can follow us on Twitter at Just Belmosto and at Nick Zararis. Are you surprised by the team that, the product, I guess, that the Flames are putting out?
I mean, they're competitive. That's really what you would expect. I mean, this is a veteran team. There's a lot of guys who had down years last year who I'm not going to say they felt bad about it, but they felt some personal responsibility to be like, hey, last year was really bad. Like, even if we're not going to be better, significantly better, I need to be better. And I think that's a lot of what's driving what success there has been this year is guys like Kadri, is guys like Uyghur, got guys like Dubé, just, we might not be that good of a team, but I'm going to show up every night and I'm going to play as hard as I possibly can. And that does matter. I mean, I know we're talking about it from a drop down view of, well, they're only hurting themselves. They should be trying to lose as many games as possible. But from a player perspective, from a building a good culture perspective, the guys who are going to be there for the long haul, the Uyghurs, the Kadris, even Huberto, they're trying their best. And that does matter to some degree because if the rebuild, not even rebuild, whatever you want to call trading all the unrestricted free agents, whatever you want to call that, if that does come to fruition, you're going to bring young guys into an environment on a team that's probably not going to be very good. But if they have guys to lean on who are still, trying their best, hyper competitive, not phoning it in, that does matter as far as establishing something going forward that, hey, we might stink right now, but eventually we're going to be better. And it's because we have guys who play the game with the right intentions. They play with the right intensity. They play with a level of professionalism requisite with being a Calgary Flame. We've been talking about that for a while now. What does it mean to be a Calgary Flame? They're not rolling over. At the very least, you can say they're not rolling over.
Yeah, and I feel like this is such a double-edged sword because you can approach it with, oh, they should be losing, like they shouldn't be going out there every night and perform uh playing the way that they're playing. But then as soon as, a big name starts dropping off in performance, it's, oh, well, they're making all this money. They should be performing better. And it's like, what where's the happy medium? Because you're not going to get bad hockey from a guy that's making that amount on purpose, and you're not gonna be happy either way. So I don't understand.
No, this is as about a no-win situation as you can get as a fan, where the team
Mhm.
is not bad enough to pick in the top 10. It's not good enough to win anything significant. There are too many old, expensive guys to really try and change the roster dramatically. So you're stuck in this holding pattern of, well, they're not awful. They can hang with good teams. They can occasionally beat a good team, but
Mhm.
it's not the most exciting brand of hockey. It's not
It's
particularly
not
visually
flashy.
it's not flashy. It's a very workman, blue collar effort to outwork the other team to win with foot speed, positioning, and physical play. It's as about as vanilla as you can possibly get of a hockey team. But I know I've said at the very least they're still trying. They're not phoning it in. You can see what it looks like when teams stop trying.
Yes.
When you start getting to the place where every game is, 6-5, 5-4, because you're not interested in playing defense. Sure, you'll try and score with the other team, but
Mhm.
defense and the neutral zone is generally where you can tell if a team's trying or not. When you see the Sharks, the amount of chances the Sharks concede defensively, I know they're not very talented, but that team is not even trying on defense. They have fully resigned to, okay, we know we can't defend, so let's just try and outscore the other team every night. The Flames are still trying defensively.
Yeah, I mean, they do have a solid defensive core. I mean, I do think that losing the physicality from Zadorov is going to be something they need to find elsewhere, and I don't know. You get a different type of physicality with Chris Tanev, and I'm not ready to part with that yet because there's no one else going out there to. I mean, I don't need you to block shots with your face, but lay your life on the line a little bit.
Nah, and it's a challenge. It's a real challenge to kind of be able to compartmentalize like that as a fan, where I do
Mhm.
enjoy watching Tanev play. I enjoy watching Elias Lindholm play. I enjoy watching Noah Hannafin play. But at some point, we got to forsake the greater good here.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is up to Craig Conroy now and deciding what he wants to do and how quickly he wants this done. Are these guys going to be moved at the deadline, or are we just waiting on July 1st?
Yeah.
That's is unfortunately what it feels like. And the endless waiting game of a Flames fan.
Yeah. Hey, man, eventually they'll figure it out.
It'll be too late, but I mean, that's kind of how the story seems to have written themselves in the past here. But I think that does it for us on today's episode of Locked On Flames. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you have enjoyed your time here. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and, of course, on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter at Jess Belmosto and at Nick Zeraris. Nick, any parting words for us today?
Oh, yeah. The Flames play hockey later.
Yeah, in like 2.5 hours? Yeah, that sounds
Something
right.
like that. Yeah.
Go Flames.